This interview was made possible in part by a grant from Arts DFW. Hi, I'm Amy Cardoso and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Kimbell Art Museum, and our interviewer, Callie Storie, speaks with curator Guillaume Kientz about their exhibition, Murillo, From Heaven to Earth. Now for Art This Week.
Hi, I'm Callie Storie, and I'm here at the Kimbell Art Museum today with Guillaume Kientz, speaking about the exhibition Murillo, From Heaven to Earth. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming.
Of course. From Heaven to Earth is the largest gathering of Murillo's works in over 2 decades in the United States. What drew you to his work, and why did now seem like the right time for an exhibition?
First of all, it's important to remind everyone that the first ever Murillo exhibition in the US was already at the Kimbell. So the Kimbell has this very special relationship to this amazing artist, Bartolomé Esteban Murillo. Murillo somehow has been kept in the shadow of Velázquez and other important masters of the Spanish school. So it was about time that we shed some lights on his work and that we help American audience to appreciate his talent. And what we decided for this show is to focus not on the religious painting that he was famous for, but on the genre scenes and the more intimate paintings that actually are more iconic. That's what people know about him. They know Murillo as a religious painter, but when it comes to paintings, well, the paintings they know are the paintings that we are surrounded by. And even if they don't know that they are by Murillo, they are familiar with the images because they are so iconic.
So I would love to get into some background on Murillo himself before we move into the wider contextual conversation. So could you give me a quick synopsis on who Murillo was and a little bit about his story?
So Murillo was a Spanish artist, southern Spain, Seville. He was the youngest son of a very, very big family. He had 13 siblings, and he became an orphan at a very early age and was raised by his sister and his sister's husband. So he trained as a painter, which was, kind of natural job at the time for an ambitious man in Seville, and became actually the most prominent artist in the 17th century in Seville and largely in Spain.
When it came to Murillo's artistic influences, who were they and how would he have been exposed to those artists?
Seville was a very, very important city in the 17th century in Spain and in Europe in general. That's an important city that the most important artists of the Spanish school were all from Seville, most of them. Velázquez was from Seville, Zurbarán was from Seville. So this is the context Murillo was born in and grew up in. So Velázquez, Zurbarán, but also other Spanish artists like Ribera had a very, very strong influence of him. Ribera was from Valencia in Spain, but was active in Italy, Rome, and then Naples. He was one of the most important followers of Caravaggio, and through works by Ribera that were sent to Seville, well, Murillo knew about the revolution that Caravaggio had started in Italy. So realism and naturalism is very much at the center, the core of Murillo's approach.
You mentioned in the catalog that one of the keys to understanding Murillo's work is understanding the societal views of morality in 17th century Seville. And so we see that theme in works like Boys Playing Dice and Invitation to a Game of Argola. How did those societal views inform Murillo's work?
So in the 17th century in Seville, that was a tough time, that was a rough time. Famine, poverty, misery. I mean, the streets of Seville was a terrible, terrible spectacle. And Murillo couldn't say nothing. He had to say something. And the global society was encouraging authorities to address that situation. And everyone had to play their role. So Murillo, as a painter, of course, he painted. He created those amazing images. The situation was that poverty was increasing at the time, and the authorities were struggling managing it, monitoring it. And so they decided to increase charity, and Murillo wanted to play his role in that. As a person, he was involved in charitable organization, brotherhood, and so on. But as a painter, he also wanted to address the theme of poverty and misery in Seville. What he brought to the table was a very specific take on the situation. Rather than depicting adult beggars in rugs in the street begging for money, he preferred to focus on the fate of children. Well, of course, he had many children himself, 10 children, and he was brother of 14 siblings, so yes, he knew what was living with children and what was a big family, and he was certainly very sensible to the fate of children, but also he saw that in the streets surrounding his house. He could see those poor children in the streets. So he decided to shed some light on them. And why on them? Well, because they're very vulnerable, and they're innocent. We all want to help children. The depiction, the view of a child in need triggers empathy and encourages charity, demands action. And Murillo understood that, probably because he felt it, and this is why he did those amazing paintings. And in many of those paintings, there is an emphasis on fate, on destiny, also on choices. And you have those amazing paintings, behind us, for instance, where children are engaged in playing, in gambling, and this is, of course, a symbol of the vulnerability of their fate, because, what is a dice? If you get 2-1, well, no, you're losing. If you get 2-6, well, you're winning. And it's not right that children's life are just like a throw of dice, that shouldn't be the case. And this is the point that Murillo is making in his painting. And this is why you have the third figure in the painting. This little boy is conflicted because he has bread, meaning that he's surviving. He has a basket with fruit, a jug, so that means that he's walking, he's trying to improve, to better his situation, his condition, but also he wants to join his companion playing the dice. So there is this temptation to idleness that existed at the time, and one had to resist it and to work hard to have a better life. So what Murillo is telling us here is that we should help them, because they are not fell down yet. They are on the edge, and it's very fragile. They could just fall into idleness, laziness, and robbery, and whatever. But if we do proper action at the proper time, well, we can help them to have the decent life that they deserve. And this is our responsibility. So those paintings, they are about poor people, but they are intended for rich people, for the wealthier part of the population. Of course, you had to be able to afford a Murillo painting, but also Murillo knew where the money was. So the point is really to trigger empathy and to encourage charity, speaking to the right audience. And the right audience were the wealthy population of Seville, and especially the merchant, Flemish merchants, who liked very much that kind of genre scene. Yeah, that's Murillo's message, and I think it still resonates today.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, you mentioned in the catalog that these works weren't intended for public display, but like you said, were for wealthy merchants, wealthy patrons. And so I think it's really incredible that he used these works to kind of inspire this act of charity also with these kids.
Absolutely, that's exactly the thing. And it's also to avoid that society closes on itself, he made the reality of the street of Seville come into the fancy houses of Seville. So you couldn't avoid, you couldn't look away. You had to know, you couldn't ignore the harsh reality of the outside world. And I think this is a very important thing, and also it's something that should inspire us, that we cannot look away. We're all the same community, and things like poverty or misery should be dealt with as a community.
Okay, so we have to talk about Four Figures on a Step, which is probably one of my favorite paintings in the Kimbell's collection. And it also deals with this sense of morality we've been talking about, but in a different way. So how did Murillo use those figures to engage with his viewer?
So most of these paintings, they are supposed to engage into a dialogue, into a conversation with the viewer, either triggering empathy and demanding act of charity, or just questioning where it is that we belong, where it is that we think, and what is our role and our responsibility in all that. And I think that this is what the Kimbell painting is doing. You have four figures on a step. Two are laughing or smirking. Two are much more serious. One, you don't see their face. It's probably a little boy leaning on the step, and then another woman that is taking care of this little boy. And she looks right at us quite seriously. She's not laughing. She is not kidding. Actually, she is questioning us, questioning what it is that we think about that situation. There is a poor boy with a hole in his trousers, and he looks sad. Even if we don't see his face, he looked miserable. And so then you have two options. Would you make fun of that because he just fell, that's fun, let's laugh? Or would you actually feel sorry for him? Oh, poor little boy, he fell, now he has a hole in his trousers, so that's sad, let's help him. So this painting is questioning our moral compass, and whether our primary tendency is to make fun and side with the people on the left side of the painting, or is to feel sorry and to want to help, and then we'll side with the woman on the right side of the painting. And there is no right or wrong. Of course, eventually we must side with the woman, and we must feel sorry for the boy. But because it is a dialogue, and because it's made of back and forth, even if we start laughing, because that's very obvious comical effect, there is a hole in the trousers, that's like Charlie Chaplin movies. So even if we laugh, well, because they laugh back, then we think and say, well, perhaps it's not the right behavior. Yes, I laughed because I was caught off guard, but after the laughter, I should actually take care of this little boy. And this is how this painting works, creating this back and forth. And then the more time you spend by the painting, the more familiar you get with it. And you realize that the people on the left side, yes, they laugh at the little boy, they may laugh at us. Do we want to look like them? They don't look good. Actually, they look either mean, ugly, and clearly ill-intentioned. So even if we had this moment of complicity with them, well, soon enough we want to distance from them and just join the right side of the story. And all those paintings, they're about that. They're about making the right choices, following the right path, and being a better person.
So let's move on to Murillo's religious works. And to quote the catalog, Murillo succeeded in humanizing the divine and sanctifying the everyday. Can you tell me how Murillo used setting to ground his contemporary audience in those biblical works?
Murillo, just because he was a painter of the 17th century and somehow an indirect follower of Caravaggio, he couldn't avoid to be influenced by Caravaggio. That was the tone of the century. Well, then he grounded his approach in the observation of real life. He based his paintings in direct observation of nature, of real people. Even if he was painting a religious painting, well, he would look carefully at real people, real objects, real setting, and would bring that to the painting so that the painting would look like something real, something almost contemporary, and people, the viewers, the believers, they would relate to it because their house would look like their own house. The objects, the ceramics, the chairs, sometimes the cats or the dogs, they would look like something they may have home. And so they would relate to the painting, and they would see the Holy Family not as something from another dimension, but as something very, very, very tangible, something they should imitate, and a perfection they may be able to reach until a certain extent. So this is why Murillo made his religious and biblical scene very much alike the daily reality of his audiences. So they would relate and they would change.
Okay, I also want to mention Murillo's portrait work, and this exhibition has the largest gathering of Murillo's portraits to ever be displayed together.
Right.
So can you first tell us what these portraits reveal about Murillo's patrons, and then secondly, how they differ from the portraits of his contemporaries?
It was very important for us to have an important section on portraits for many reasons. One is that it was important to remind that the genre scenes and those depictions of beggars and urchins, actually they were intended to a wealthy audience. And I wanted to embody this wealthy audience. I wanted to show the people that were targeted by Murillo as a genre scene painter. So that's one reason. The other reason is that Murillo was never acknowledged for his talent as a portrait painter, and that's a wrong that we needed to right. Why so? Well, probably because in Spain, arriving after Velázquez, of course Velázquez is one of the greatest portrait painters in all time, so it was difficult for Murillo to find a room next to Velázquez. He was very much in the shadow of Velázquez. But there is room for more than one painter, and what clearly this exhibition shows is how great a portraitist Murillo was. And influenced by Velázquez, this is true, but also it brings something that Velázquez did not. Murillo brings more charm, more sensibility, it's more vaporous, it's more enveloping. You have this charmingness in Murillo's painting that I'm not saying they are lacking in Velázquez. Velázquez's point was a different one. It's more austere, it's more straightforward, it's more violent in a way. No, Murillo is a peaceful approach to portraiture. And I think this exhibition illustrates that quite well.
So one thing I've been wondering since the tour you gave earlier, you mentioned that there are 16 dogs in the exhibition. Do you have a favorite?
Well, I'm a dog person,
Me too.
And I grew up with not one dog but many dogs. So so it's difficult to only pick one.
It's a hard question.
And actually there is a recurring dog. There is certainly a dog that belongs to Murillo and that you can follow from one painting to the other. Because as much as all that looks like reality, it's all artificial, of course. It's all staged by Murillo. And so the objects were ours, the animals were probably pets he had or animals that were in the neighborhood. But to answer your question about the dog, well, perhaps the dog from the Prodigal Son series, because you see it in two different paintings. In the first one, that's a banquet scene. The dog is eating a bone under the table, quite discreetly and voraciously. Yeah. And the next painting is when the prodigal son is chased out the city. And then the dog turns its back against the prodigal son. So that's not a very nice dog. It's a dog that's stick with you as long as you have bread to give. But when the good time is over, well, the dog barks at you. So that's not my experience of dog. But I found I found it a funny detail.
I love that. I love all the dogs. And lastly, is there a piece in the exhibition that felt especially satisfying to you to get into the exhibition? I know the logistics of an exhibition the size have to be quite daunting.
Well, I have a soft spot for the young beggar from the Louvre because I used to be a curator there for 10 years, so of course I have this special connection to that painting. What I find really, really impressive, the large portrait of El Marqués de la Hurtado with these three dogs. Is hunting, is wearing a hunting outfit in a large landscape. What I like with this painting is that it intersects with many, of Murillo's talent and area of exploration: portraiture, landscape, animals, fashion, because there's a lot to say about fashion in Murillo's painting. So it's quite a pivotal work between indoor, outdoor, high life, low life, landscape, ruins, animals, and so on. So yes, I think this painting is definitely a showstopper.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Sure,
That's all
you're
for
welcome.
today. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
We want to thank Guillaume for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to kimbellart.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching. Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.